I'm Mike, about to turn 50, and my son is about to graduate from college. We talked about taking a trip together just a few days ago as a celebration. I never imagined that just a few days later, I would lose my job. When I was laid off, a lot of things went through my mind, but the first thing I thought of was him. I got divorced when my son was in first grade. The fights with my wife became incessant, and after a long discussion, we decided to split. Deciding who would take custody of our son took even more time, but considering it's just us guys, it was decided that I should be the one to take in my son. Since then, I've tried to raise him well. He never really went through a rebellious phase, and since he became an adult, grabbing a drink together has become our daily routine, showing how close we are. We were both really looking forward to the trip, but now that's out of the question. When I told him about losing my job, he was shocked at first but then laughed.
If you can find a job soon, I'll support you.
I really think I've raised a good kid. But I can find it funny to be supported by my son, who has just entered the workforce. Besides, after graduating from college, my son has decided to move in with his girlfriend. She was a classmate at college and is a kind-hearted girl. Since my son and I lived just the two of us, we often ended up with ready-made meals, so she started coming over to cook for us occasionally. It seems she comes from a close-knit family. The stories she tells about her sister and parents are always heartwarming. She's the ideal girl for my son. I haven't heard them talk about marriage yet, but moving in together isn't something they're taking lightly, I suppose. For my part, I've been treating her like a future daughter-in-law. If her parents found out that the reason for canceling their living together plans was that her boyfriend's father became unemployed, they would definitely insist on breaking them up if they were in my shoes. I decided to start looking for a job immediately. However, probably due to my age, I mostly got rejected at the application stage. I finally managed to get an interview for a front desk position at a well-known local hotel. I had no experience in the service industry and wasn't confident, but the first interview went well, and it seemed like there were no issues. The next day, I was informed that I had passed the first interview and would proceed to the final round. It turns out the front desk job includes night shifts. Despite some health concerns, I started feeling hopeful about getting the job. It seemed like I could avoid becoming a burden to my son as an unemployed father.
At your age, leaving a long-time job as a medical administrator to come here. Did something happen?
The man, looking much younger, maybe around 30, asked me this with a sigh, legs crossed. I don't know what a normal interview is like, but unlike the first round, I wasn't even asked to have a seat, so I remained standing next to a metal chair. I had heard the final interview would be with the general manager and the front desk manager, who would be my direct supervisor. However, there was a problem, and the general manager couldn't attend the interview. Maybe because his boss wasn't there, this guy had an attitude right from the start. Under the director's policy, they wanted to bring in some fresh air.
Oh, I hear that a lot. You didn't take it literally, did you? Maybe your presence was just becoming a hindrance, and that's why they said it.
His tone got even sharper, and I couldn't respond.
You being quiet won't help. Some customers will be much harsher. So you can't get down with this, right?
I'm sorry.
What about your wife? Do you have kids?
I'm divorced. I have a son who is a senior in college.
So, your son is about to enter the workforce. Don't you think it's sad for a child to have an unemployed father as a role model?
I nearly blurted out that's why I was desperately looking for a job, but I feared he would retort that I should then act accordingly, so I carefully chose my words, and the conversation moved on. As a result, I couldn't properly answer any of the questions. I had finally made it to an interview, but I was sure I wouldn't get this job. Just as I began to think I might have to look for a part-time job, that concludes the interview, he said, as if reading my mind.
What were you thinking coming here at your age, huh?
Just before the door closed, I heard that sneer. He must have said it intentionally for me to hear. I thought I'd rather fail the interview and look for a part-time job than work under someone like that, but the next day, I got a call from HR telling me I was hired. As expected, the hellish days began. I started to think he hired me just to vent his stress because he blatantly picked on me. He, the front manager Simon, didn't properly teach me the ropes of customer service, which was already new to me. Other staff tried to help me out when they could, but they were stretched thin themselves. It was supposed to be a recruitment to cover for a staff member going on maternity leave, but then an experienced staff member found a new job and quit at the same time. They were all overwhelmed just keeping up with their own work.
I'm sorry, we can teach you.
Being apologized to by ones the same age as my son feels awkward. Moreover, there seemed to be many regular customers who often didn't give their names at check-in. Whenever I hesitated, Simon usually stepped in.
Sorry about this. He may look like this, but he's just a rookie.
He emphasized my being new at this age. Simon hardly ever helped me when I was struggling, except for these moments. What troubled me further was that everything had to be processed on a computer. I had used computers in my previous job, but learning the hotel-specific system at this age was incredibly challenging. Even when I asked the younger staff members, who were on shift with me, they were tech-savvy and couldn't grasp what I didn't understand, leaving me in a bind. I couldn't keep up with the night shifts either, and when I finally thought it was time for a nap, Simon wouldn't let it slide. Often, my break time ended while I was still standing at the front desk because there were no guests, and it was a good time to practice. Then, an incident occurred. That day was the eve of an entrance exam at a nearby college, and most of the business hotels in the area were fully booked. Many students ended up staying at our pricier hotel for the exam. Everyone checked out around the same time, in line with the exam schedule. The front desk was busier than I'd ever seen, and I was just wishing for my shift to end. Somehow, I made it through the rush and was beckoned by a younger staff member to the office. Apparently, even the senior staff hate working the night shift on this day every year, and it was unheard of for a newbie like me to be scheduled. It must have been Simon's doing. It felt awkward to be treated by someone younger, but I downed a coffee given as a gesture of appreciation in one go. By the way, Simon apparently always takes this day off every year. He's never around on busy days, which is actually a relief. I'd rather not deal with him. He whispered it to me on the sly. The rest of the staff were all great people. I can keep going thanks to everyone. Thank you. Just 5 minutes before clocking out, the phone rang, and I could tell everyone tensed up. Answering it would likely mean staying past my scheduled time. It should have been hard on everyone, having a newbie like me on shift during such a busy time. I steeled myself to at least handle the phone call, but that resolve was quickly broken. I remembered someone once saying, "Why do calls right before leaving always bring trouble?" A charm. Under the pillow. Yes, got it. Just by the words I uttered, those around seemed to sense the hassle. The caller was a father of a college applicant who had checked out. He explained that his daughter, desperate to pass her college exam, slept with a charm from her grandmother under her pillow and forgot it there. It might have been found by the cleaning staff if it was under the pillow, I thought, and felt relieved for a moment, but checking revealed no such item was found. Even after a thorough search of the room, it remained missing. When I told the father we couldn't find it, I heard him shout at his daughter over the phone, "Why would you put it there?" From bits of the conversation, I realized that the daughter hadn't placed the charm under the pillow, but inside the pillowcase. I know how stressful college exams can be. Having a college-aged child myself, I've heard of kids running away from home during exam season. And being in the pillowcase, the charm might be easier to find. "It's okay, I will find it for sure. Please go to the exam without worry," I declared, but for some reason, the charm was nowhere to be found. There are often forgotten items on the beds, and though they are thoroughly checked, pillowcases aren't given as much attention, so it could have slipped inside during the change. After searching even through the trash and finding nothing, as I was about to give up 2 hours into overtime, I decided to check the room one last time. There, in a gap under the bed meant for wiring, I spotted something. Shining a light, I found a charm, inscribed with wishes for success. I let him know I found it.
"This means a lot to my daughter. Thank you,"
the father of the applicant said, very pleased. "I'm glad, and now I can finally go home." But then, Simon, who had started the late shift, showed up.
Why are you still here?
While other staff explained the trouble, Simon wouldn't listen.
You didn't stay just to get overtime pay, did you?
No, it was a young girl in trouble, about my son's age, so I just
Think mentioning your kid excuses anything. That's why I never wanted to hire an old guy like you.
Seeing my exhausted expression, the staff arriving for the late shift asked if I was okay, but I don't remember what I answered. Before I could touch the door to leave the office, it opened on its own. A man in an expensive suit, not a uniform, looked at my name tag and smiled.
"Finally got to meet you."
General Manager. Good evening, sir.
Simon's usual sour demeanor vanished as he started talking to the general manager with a smile, as if it were all a lie. I was so surprised that I missed both the chance to greet and to leave.
"You are Dr. Johnson's son, right?"
I was slow to respond to a name I hadn't heard in a long time, and the general manager tilted his head in confusion.
"Oh, did I get it wrong?"
"No, you're right. You knew my father."
"I remember you too. My son and my grandkids have been taken care of by Dr. Johnson, you know."
Simon looked at us, clearly confused. "Dr. Johnson is my father. He's a doctor at a local clinic in town. It's a small place, but he's well respected, and many locals have been cared for by him since their childhood."
"But why are you here?"
It's a blessing, no doubt about it, but the clinic is always busy now. It's become like a gathering place for the elderly, similar to those seen in TV series about island clinics, so it's crowded. While there are indeed elderly people who are truly unwell, kids coming in for something like a cold often have no place to sit. My dad's solution to handle the situation was to start a nursing home. In my relaxed state, thinking someone would come to intervene, my dad said to me,
"You'll be running it."
I said that was impossible.
"Well, then you were fired. Go learn about service first."
He said and kicked me out. So, thinking a hotel would be a good place to learn about service, I ended up applying here among other places.
That's so like Dr. Johnson.
I originally worked at the clinic for my son's sake. My previous job paid well but had too much overtime, which wasn't ideal for raising a child. I asked my dad if I could work as a medical administrator at his clinic, and that's how I ended up there. Maybe he thought it was time for me to start a new path now that my son was graduating from college and would be out of my hands. As we talked amicably, I noticed Simon's face growing paler by the minute. No wonder, since the guy he'd been harassing was acquainted with his boss. The general manager remembered me from the clinic's reception and said he didn't join the interview because he intended to hire me anyway, just going through the motions. I wasn't planning to work here forever, and Simon seemed shocked enough, so I was going to let it slide. However, the pent-up frustrations of the other staff seemed far greater than mine.
Simon, are you okay with not telling Mike to get out, like you usually do with him? So you told him earlier, you're staying late just for the overtime pay, right?
They teased him relentlessly.
What's going on? Was Mike really staying this late after a night shift?
Well, you see, I wasn't aware of the circumstances.
Simon started making excuses, but everyone told him he hadn't really listened to my explanation. The general manager took him away, and he didn't return for an hour. Simon, who had a good external image, seemed to have been the general manager's favorite until now, but as rain was likely over. Just when I thought I could go to work worry-free the next day, I received a message from my son on the train home.
I'm bringing my girlfriend over today.
Could it be that her parents found out I quit my medical administration job and switched to being a hotel front desk staff at my age? Technically, it was a career move to manage a nursing home, but from my father's attitude, nothing specific seemed decided. I worried about what would happen if they wanted to cancel the cohabitation, not to mention the marriage. These thoughts kept me wide awake despite having just finished a night shift. That night, my son didn't come home with just his girlfriend but 2 other people. She introduced them as her father and sister. Nervous about what would be said, her father spoke to me.
Thank you for today.
Today,
Thank you for finding the charm.
they were the family who had forgotten the charm. She had moved from the neighboring county to attend the same college as my son and lived alone. Her sister, too fond of her, seemed to have decided to apply to the same college. She said her sister staying in her room tonight, but apparently, her sister had planned to stay at a hotel for studying the night before the exam. She suggested her sister to stay where I work instead. She tilted her head, saying she must have told my son. Why he kept it from me would be a story for another time.
Given your son, I feel comfortable entrusting my daughter to him.
Hearing this, I hastily responded with a smile. 2 weeks after that whirlwind day, it was officially announced that Simon was transferred. He hadn't been to work since the next day, leading some to think he had quit. Actually, the general manager had taken him aside for retraining to avoid further inconvenience to the front desk staff, I heard. But I dared not ask for details. He was set to start over as a staff member at a chain business hotel. Thanks to Mike, I became an instant hero at the front desk. On a personal note, there was another piece of good news. Though I shouldn't rejoice as a father, my son's cohabitation plans with his girlfriend were put on hold, for a good reason. Her sister, if she passed the exam, wanted to live with her big sis. The girlfriend, too, felt concerned about her sister living alone, so they decided to postpone living together until after her sister graduated college. That means no marriage for another 4 years. Perhaps her sister had aimed for the same college and kept the charm in her pillowcase, wishing to get accepted there. We can live together a little longer, my son said with a complex expression as he drained his beer. Anyway, I felt a bit happy. Just like her sister isn't ready to be away from her, I guess I need a little more time to let go of my